Good evening. Good evening. I trust you had a fruitful day. I do not say happy, though I hope it has been happy. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Homage to the Buddha, the blessed, noble, and fully self-awakened one. So I thought this evening we might get back to some serious Dharma. Enough of entertainment. I'm looking at the Discourse 115 called the Many Kinds of Elements, and in it we have dependent origination, which of course many of you will know, but it's good to just go through it as a sort of reminder. Now, Ananda is the protagonist. He's the one who's asking the questions, and he says, "Venerable Sir, in what way can a bhikkhu or somebody involved in the spiritual life called skilled in dependent origination?" So how does he become knowledgeable of dependent origination, and how should he practice it? So it begins with a statement about causality. Here, Ananda, a bhikkhu knows this. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. And with the cessation of this, that ceases. That's pretty clear. So it's all very cryptic, and it's not really expounded in the discourses as far as I know. But of course, the commentaries do, and modern writers. So this is the platform, really, of the Buddha's understanding as to why things happen in the first place, or rather how they happen. So the first statement is, when this exists, that comes to be. That's what we would call ordinary linear causality. So you did something yesterday, and because of that, this has happened. So because of the dry weather, our gardener Andy has told me to get out there and water the plants. So because he told me that, tomorrow I've got to go out and water the plants. That's pretty straightforward. And of course, if something doesn't happen, then there are consequences that could have happened that don't happen. So if Andy didn't remind me that the beds are getting dry, we've had such dry weather, I wouldn't notice personally, and all the lovely flowers would die away. I'd probably notice it when they start withering. So that's a sort of just a linear process. Now, if you think about that, it's very difficult to understand where anything different could happen, because if something's happened in the past and then it produces something, what would be new to produce something else? So there'd be some idea of repetition, some idea of some fate or something, and that, when it comes into morality, does manifest in people's thoughts about fate. That everything is set in the past, and this is, and you can't do anything about it. There was a teacher in the Buddha's time who actually taught that sort of thing. He said, if you go down one side of the Ganges and do all sorts of wonderful, compassionate and loving acts, and come up the other side murdering and pilfering, it wouldn't make the slightest bit of difference, because your destiny is set because of fate, you see. And many things do happen like that in our lives, like just very simple stuff, like the sun rises in the morning and it sets at night, and we tend to get up in the morning and go to bed at night. So there's a lot of our lives which are, so we say, repetitious, slight changes, but there's a sort of linear process going on. But as I say, the danger of that is that you either think everything's going to be repeated, or everything is set in the past. Now, the other part of the equation is with the arising of this, that arises. And with the cessation of this, that ceases. So now we're coming into the present moment. Excuse me. Now we're coming into the present moment, and where things meet, where things come together. And of course, that produces a certain event. But because if this was the only law, just things coming together without any order, then presumably what we would have would be a chaotic universe. There'd be no order in it. So the linear one gives us some sort of order, and this present moment gives us some sort of chaos. So when you put the two together, you have a certain type of creativity. So for instance, all of you now who are listening to this, you've all come from various places and various decisions. And just for this coming together for this YouTube event, it's created this event. So it's the same with anything that happens. You'll always find that there are strands of happenings coming from the past, from various people, various occasions, etc., to produce an event. So every moment is an event which contains something from the past and something which happens right in this present moment. And in that sense, life is contingent in the sense that you don't actually know fully what's going to happen. So from a karma point of view, if you just believe, well, everything's chaotic, there's no reason for anything, there's no order, then of course that would make you completely immoral, because you'd think, well, it doesn't really matter what I do because anything could happen out of it. So the idea of doing something good with good results just wouldn't make sense. So somehow these two parts have to be put together to create a sense of order in the universe, but also a sense of creativity. And that's the Buddha's platform for karma. Okay. So that's the little equation he has. It's called the law of this and that, or specific conditionality. Sounds a bit like Einstein, you know, but it reduces, it gives us some sort of formula whereby we can understand why things happen. So for instance, even though you might be brightly aware, brightly mindful, that doesn't mean to say an accident can't happen, right? Because you don't know what's going to happen next. So some things happen because of accidents, and it can be very annoying, you know, when you do something and say, and a cup breaks or something happens, somebody says, "Oh, be more aware," you see. But it's not quite right, that, because you know, some things happen because they're accidents, because you don't know what's going to happen next. There was an occasion I was at the London Vihara, and they have a big fridge there, and of course people come, they offer food, and they just stick it in, you know. And I'd gone to the fridge to get some milk, and I opened it, and all this food fell out, and it all fell on the floor. And I got blamed for it, you see. And I said, well, you know, whoever put the food in there didn't balance it, didn't put it in correctly. It was ready to fall out for the next person who opened the door, you see. Because they didn't. All they were worried about was the loss of food. See, that's what happens when you're a monk. You get a bit obsessive about food. So. If you've got that in mind, then you can understand how things happen which weren't meant to happen. Hopefully that it'll always be for the good. So creating that sort of base of understanding, the Buddha then says, so with ignorance as a condition, formations come to be. Okay, so with ignorance as a condition. So now we have to understand what he means by ignorance, or the word that's being translated is avidya. Vidya just means knowing. but it also has a the understanding of insight. So without insight, without wisdom, this comes to be. Okay, and of course it posits the question: well, what is it that's wise, and what is it that's lacking the wisdom? Okay, and that not knowing. That's probably the best translation for it, just not knowing. Yeah, just not knowing something, we create formations. Now, this word formation, sankhara, we've come across before with the five aggregates, right? So they are what we create through our volitions, right? They are our habits of thought, habits of speech, and habits of physical habits. And that's where our personal karma is. And perhaps we'll come to that at a later date, because following this, it would be good to have a look at karma again. So this ignorance isn't sort of in the past, it's now. This not knowing, this not really understanding the way things are is with us all the time. It's sort of sitting underneath our moment-to-moment experience. And because of that, we've created these different habits. I'm not going to be able to get through all of it, but that's okay, because we can finish off tomorrow, you see. Now, because of these formations, dependent on these habits, consciousness arises. So again, we have to go back to those five khandhas, to those five heaps, the body, feelings, perceptions, concepts, these all of which make up these habits or be part of a habit, and then finally consciousness, which is the screen upon which everything occurs. So because of these habits which come up, which sort of begin to manifest, consciousness arises. They become known. And then with consciousness as a condition, mentality, materiality. So because of this this screen of consciousness, we become aware of this psychophysical organism. Basically, that's what it is. So all our mind constructs, everything that happens in the mind, thinking and imagining, everything that happens at the heart level, the emotions, the moods, etc., and everything that comes from the body, all the sensations, the feelings, etc., all these manifest on that consciousness. Now, without consciousness, they wouldn't manifest. Okay, so here we have a sort of connection. We have present underneath everything, there is this not knowing, this delusion, right? And because of that, we've created these habits. Now, the habits come into consciousness, and of course, what comes onto consciousness at base is this psychophysical organism. Okay. And and then the next sentence is with mentality, materiality, and it's funny words really, it's just body and mind as far as we're concerned. The sixfold sense base arises. So obviously, once the body, the body and heart mind arise, the whole organism, so do the sense bases. All right. Now all these things arise together. It's not as though first you get the body and then the sense bases. The consciousness, the sense bases, the consciousness, the body and mind, and the sense bases all arise at one and the same time, right? And because of these sankharas, these habits, they'll be doing something. Something will manifest on that consciousness. Yeah, so I hope it's not getting too complicated, this. Sometimes I get tongue-tied myself. So to repeat that, at base, underneath everything, from moment to moment, we have this not knowing. It's not a culpable ignorance, right? We just don't know. And we've made mistakes in the past, and we've ended up with all these habits. Moment after moment, these habits begin to manifest on the screen of consciousness. And when consciousness arises, what is known? This organism is known, right? This body and mind and heart and the sense bases which are in the body, right? Eye, ear, nose, etc. The brain as part of that structure. Now, because of that sense, because of the senses, because of those 6 senses, then we have our first contact. Okay, so this is where underneath you've got this delusion and the sankhara. Okay, so you have to have that sort of image in your mind that every moment there is this basic delusion, but what it's created are these habits. Okay, and it's because of this that consciousness arises. Now, as consciousness arises, it's not aware of these habits that are sitting underneath. It's only aware of one habit or something that arises at that moment onto that screen of consciousness. And that screen of consciousness has on it this organism, and it has the sense bases, and it's with that we have contact. Okay, so that's the moment. So underneath the moment of contact, there is this ongoing ignorance, ongoing not knowing, this ongoing development of the habits. There's this body, heart, and mind, and there's consciousness. And as soon as that arises, when all those arises, you have contact. You have contact with the world, the outer world, and the inner world. So just very quickly from then, because we'll go over that tomorrow. From there, of course, you get feeling. Now, what feeling is whatever information comes up at the point of contact is then experienced as either pleasant or unpleasant, or if it's in between, we say neutral. It's neither pleasant nor unpleasant. And that's our lives are an ongoing experience at that conscious level of mental states, physical states that are either pleasant, unpleasant, or just neutral. Okay, so that's what we're generally aware of. And then, of course, we get the reaction, which is the desire. So that's we can leave that there for today. That's enough to go on. It's enough to go on with just for this particular sitting. So if I'm repeating it all because I know for many people, for some people, this will be sort of new, or they haven't really gone into it with much depth. So it's worth just spending a bit of time of that. If you can bring up these things into your thinking at some point, just to remind yourself that at base, underneath every moment, there is this not knowing. And of course, what is it that doesn't know? It's the awareness. The awareness doesn't know. Remember, awareness has 2 qualities. It has a receptive quality, which we call awareness, and an active quality, which we call intuitive intelligence. So it's an intuitive awareness. So it's that very awareness which is not knowing, and it makes these mistakes, right, whereby we create habits which are either wholesome or unwholesome, etc. But they've always got that sense of identity. So you don't forget that the fundamental delusion is one of identifying with this whole psychophysical organism. So that's running underneath everything we're doing. That's the sort of background programs, to use a computer terminology, the background program that's always there. And depending on what actually hits the sense base, then that habit will arise. And it won't arise unless, of course, there's a body and a heart, mind, and the 6 sense bases. Okay, so tomorrow we'll look at the middle section more, which tells us how we create this problem through the process of desire. So I can only hope my words have been of some assistance, that they have not truly caused any confusion. And you can email me, by the way, if I have, and that you will, by your practice, establish a foundation of knowing, which allows you to become fully liberated sooner rather than later. So we can do a little practice.